Chris Cottrell with Winston Strawn.
Thank you very much for joining the program here today. Wanted to ask you about a few things involved with some legal activity involved in the oil and gas industry. Force majeure, that's been a term that's popped up in some headlines I've seen, and I did see it trickle into the oil and gas industry the other day. Originally, I saw it in the NBA. I follow sports, so I saw it in the NBA as a way not to pay players was actually the way it came up in the headline. And then, like I said, I saw it in the oil and gas world, and I thought, oh boy, I better get an attorney on here to talk about that, because my guess is that it was going to come up, and it has something to do with natural disasters and some things, force of God, that sort of thing. And then also, Chris Cottrell, we've talked about some M&A activity in the past, and this is going to be a little bit of a pop quiz, and he's not prepared for this, but he also is a pro, so he knows what's going on. He's an attorney. He knows what he can and cannot say, so I'm going to ask him have his crystal ball for a minute when it comes to some M&A activity, mostly just because Whiting filed a bankruptcy, something or another. I don't know what chapter or what version, but I know they filed something. So anyway, that's a little bit of a preview. And Chris, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing well, Jason. I just want to thank you for having me on. I'm excited to be on, and also want to take a moment right now to tell the audience that I hope they're staying safe in their homes, and also to all those who've been laid off or furloughed. We're all thinking about you. You're not alone, and we're all looking for this thing to let up so we can go back to work.
You and I were talking a little bit before we got on the air about the home office environment. I've been doing it since the early 2000s, being a journalist and a podcaster, talk show host, remote nomad, if you will. When we're taking a look at something to do with the legal side of things, I would imagine for you it was a pretty simple transition as well.
It certainly, from a technology perspective, it was pretty seamless for me. But everything takes some getting used to, especially when people have their schedule and routines, and all of a sudden nobody has a schedule or routine, and we're kind of in each other's way. That's certainly something that I think we're all trying to deal with and kind of take day by day.
Wanted to ask you about the coronavirus too. You mentioned that. I'm not sure if your office is open, if you guys are bringing in appointments, one at a time, or sanitizing offices or anything like that. Just take an opportunity, talk about if you guys are accepting business right now, if you guys are having people at your office, or you're just doing teleconference type thing. What is your guys' work environment life like, and how are you guys currently making money?
Well, that's a good question. I think, first and foremost, the firm's very concerned about the employees, the staff, and their safety is of utmost concern. So, we've decided to be ultra cautious and go ahead and close our offices. And of course, there is some staff still coming into the office to the extent that their presence is required in the office. You can't cut everybody out of the office, but for the most part, everybody's working from home. Our technology group has been really incredible, helping us get the tools that we need to take conference calls, to continue to do business and continue to counsel our clients. So we're continuing to take calls. We're trying to put as much content out as possible. We're trying to anticipate legal issues. Trying to obviously reach out to our clients. First and foremost, make sure they're safe. Make sure that they're that they have everything they need, and just doing a checkup. But then obviously we're here to help them think about some of the difficulties that they're facing as we progress through this virus.
I would imagine attorneys are going to be, busy everything from, updating wills to checking real estates to checking rental properties, all kinds of different things as people are. I always say people are putting everything on the table right now, and they're trying to figure out what to take off and what's rationally to take off, and that's why we're going to get to force majeure in just a second. But you and I have talked about some M&A activity in the past, haven't we? Do I have my interviews right here?
Yeah, we talked a lot about energy M&A.
Hopefully
nobody goes back and listens to them, because I was wrong on oil prices and such like that. But
I think everybody was on that. So yeah. It's including some big panels, like Federal Reserves and everything like that. They had a whole different outlook for this year. But then Russia, Saudi Arabia, of course, the coronavirus. It's the 1-2 supply demand shock that happened. So, I'm thinking about, attorneys and M&A activity and contracts disputes and all kinds of different things. I mean, you guys are going to be busy from all kinds of different angles and all kinds of different realities that are happening. When I look at the M&A activity, we're coming off of, today with Whiting's bankruptcy notification. I don't even know what. It's a rescheduling or a reshuffling of debt. I'm not sure what the chapters are or anything, but I'm not, picking on them. They just happen to be in the news today. We knew this was coming. We knew that this was some things that we were going to see. The Whiting example, they posted their debt back in November, so that's why a lot of people were watching it so closely. Talk to me about some of the M&A activity that you're going to see over the next, whatever. I mean, we were going to see it anyway, but now with the coronavirus, I would imagine we'll probably see more, won't we?
Well, I think we've had that kind of we've been talking about it for so long, and we've been saying we need a wave of restructuring, and we need a wave of consolidation in the industry, and it really, with the exception of a few deals that happen, we haven't really seen it come to fruition. So obviously, I think there's a lot of pent-up demand, and this is certainly forcing people's hands at this point. So what we're anticipating happening is that first and foremost, oil and gas companies still have a lot of assets. They still have a lot of things that they can optimize. So we think that there's going to be downstream produced water assets that get spun out to raise additional capital. There's royalty assets that could get spun out, and also obviously midstream gathering assets that we think could still get spun out to generate extra cash. So that's the opportunity that we're seeing. I think the second thing that we're going to see is obviously these bankruptcies. There's restructuring opportunities. So hopefully lenders work with oil and gas operators to try to rework all the debt and make it to where oil and gas operators can actually operate in this environment. To the extent that doesn't happen, then obviously there's a liquidation, and at that point there's a forced sale of the assets. So last year our firm worked on the White Star bankruptcy matter, and that was a liquidation. So they call it a 363 sale. That's kind of the term, and it's a provision in bankruptcy code that covers how that process happens. But effectively, the assets get put up in an auction, and there's bidding procedures and rules, and basically assets go to the highest bidder. And the nice thing about that process is that even though a lot of these assets do have liens on them. They have a lot of issues from a debt perspective. That process allows these assets to be traded basically free and clear to the buyer, and it's a very unique tool that people have, and it actually, in theory, could make a lot of assets a lot more attractive.
So when I'm looking at somebody like Whiting, who filed today, and it looks like Chapter 11, bankruptcy protection, in the Bankruptcy Court of the Southern District of Texas, okay. What does that mean? What does Chapter 11 mean? I guess there's Chapter 7, there's Chapter 11, and then there's certain protections and not certain protections. Which one's personal? Which one's business? Which one means you're done? Which one means you can restructure? That sort of thing.
Well, I'm certainly not a bankruptcy expert by any means.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought that was something in your wheelhouse. I apologize.
But Dan McGuire at our firm is kind of really one of the head guys that deals with bankruptcies, and he gave a great talk yesterday on this stuff. But effectively, the high level is that Chapter 11 is restructuring.
Okay, so, and that's what I was looking for, was the high level. Yeah.
So they're attempting to reorganize.
Okay.
And basically basically convert some of the debt load they have, get some forgiveness, and get lower interest on the remaining debt.
Okay. So that's what that is there. Okay, and then there's that's not the one where they're just done. They dissolve. You mentioned something about liquidation of assets before as one of the avenues, and that's, I suppose, if they don't get things taken care of. But that's not where we're at. I just was trying to get my handle on which ones were which. So, okay.
And Chapter 7 is a liquidation. So that's a high level.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chapter 11, Chapter 7. All right. So let's transition.
And by the way, I mean, once you get into the process, I mean, obviously, people want to hold on to their jobs and hold on to their assets and try to get, survive another day. But at the end of the day, the lenders, there could be some difficulties in reorganizing this stuff, and you could get forced into a liquidation. And
does this make them more attractive to get purchased? Does this make them? Can they be? Is that involved at all in this?
So I mean, yeah, I would say if you've got a bunch of unpaid liens that you have to deal with before you can sell your assets, right? I mean, especially with mechanics liens, right? If you have an oil and gas operator, a drilling company that's going out and drilling wells and they haven't been paid, well, obviously you're going to have to pay the liens off before you can transfer the assets, or whoever the transferee is ends up assuming any of these liabilities that are out there. This is a way for the assets to get transferred free and clear. So obviously, there's royalty payment issues. There's various issues, gathering issues that the operator could have historical liens from, and so yeah, it would make things more attractive if they obviously didn't have the liens and they were kind of went through this liquidation process.
Yeah, when you mentioned earlier about some of the royalty assets and a few other things, I thought, from just a sheer business standpoint, if somebody's oil prices are down, obviously that's a good time to buy, because when they go up, then you've made money. So this to me would be very similar. So
buy low, sell high, right?
That's right. That's where my mind was, and again, very unfortunate news. Obviously, you've been on social media just like I have. You're seeing there are layoffs happening. People are looking for work, that sort of thing. Let's talk about something a little bit different, I guess. Let's talk about that force majeure that is happening and in some other industries, and now we're starting to see it a little bit in the oil and gas industry. And talk to me a little bit about that, what this is, how this kind of ended up in some contracts, because I went back and even looked at some of my contracts from 10, 15 years ago, and it's in there. I mean, it's pretty standard.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty standard in the industry. And obviously, the way the rule works is different state by state. But the big picture is that force majeure is basically a situation where one of the parties in the oil and gas would be the lessee, obviously the operator. Something happens to the lessee that's beyond their control, that isn't foreseeable, and so they're forgiven from certain obligations that they have under the contract for a certain period of time until that event gets resolved or goes away, right? And so, as you mentioned, acts of God, things like that, lightning strikes, earthquakes, things like that are typically what are covered. This is a unique situation. Obviously, no one wrote in their contract coronavirus. So, in Texas, it's going to be a challenge in certain situations because courts in Texas look strictly at the contract language, and they want the contract to govern. So if force majeure is something that should be in place, typically they want to see the language in the contract, and here to take it to the next level, that they want to see some language around something like epidemic, something that's like that would encompass the coronavirus situation that we have right now. So to the extent that people don't have that language, then the question is was this foreseeable? Was this a foreseeable event? And so that's going to be a question that we don't have the answer to right now.
Well, and that was one of the questions I was going to ask you was epidemic and pandemic, if this is something that is needed in the contract or if this is something that, say, the state has to officially label it as. For example, in my backyard, North Dakota just got awarded the presidential decree for declaring emergency assistance. It's a process you have to go through. And, they're not even shut down. The golf course is open today in North Dakota, and they're getting federal assistance for, economic disaster. I mean, it's kind of funny, but when they happen on the same day. But when it comes to some of the terminology, you mentioned the epidemic, and I imagine pandemic would be a similar word. Does that have to be in the actual contract, or does that have to be, the language officially decreed by the government?
So I think that's a fair point. I mean, if you want the contract to be a home run, obviously it'll have the language epidemic.
Or did I just make you $500,000 for arguing next year for somebody? Because that's a good point.
Well, it's something that we've all, I mean, I think it's a great point. Obviously, I think we're all in agreement with you that this is, a lot of the language in there talks about government orders or regulations. And to the extent that you're prevented from doing something because of a government intervention or a change in rules, then obviously, that's exactly what this provision would typically cover. And so, I was talking to a client yesterday, and, if the Texas Railroad Commissioner, one of them is listening to this, I would, strongly urge them to declare some kind of order, so these operators can have a backstop and be protected from someone saying, "Hey, this is not a force majeure," right? I mean, I think any kind of governmental declaration really, really strengthens the case. And then obviously, if that doesn't happen, then I hope that a lot of people have good relations with their landowners. I hope that they've done the right thing, that they've shown integrity, and that they can make these tough calls and try to work with the landowners to get some kind of resolution.
Are you seeing any of these pop up yet? I'm reading about cases in Europe, and like I said, I'm seeing headlines happen where it's kind of happening. I'm seeing some. Well, I'm looking here at Canada. It looks like it's popping up too a little bit. Obviously, you're seeing them come across your news briefings too, that sort of thing. So, is this that was a great mention to the Texas Railroad Commission? This to me seems like something that is more on a proactive nature, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that would be a proactive position. I mean, they've I just got off the call with somebody before this call, and we were talking about, there's Parsley and Pioneer, two big operators in the Midland Basin here in Texas, and they've written a letter to the commissioners requesting that they enact, proration or volumetric restrictions on producers to try to stabilize the supply and demand dynamic. So we're starting to see, people trying to be proactive and trying to get as much relief from the commission as possible.
I'd like to even point this out too. Is the reason I wanted to have you on, Chris Cottrell, by the way, is to kind of help guide through this, because not only is it confusing for an attorney, but it's very confusing for an average layman. Like, I was just looking down at my notes and I wrote down disruption event, and then I wrote, loan next to it. And I don't even know what that means, but I know that it's something that is not quite force majeure, but it's underneath it in some way or another. So I was going to ask you if those words mean anything to you in the world of oil and gas, because I guess I was trying to do some notes on it, and I came across this something to do with a loan model form, and it has to do with the disruption event, and I don't know if that's getting too far into the weeds, I guess.
Yeah, so a big issue right now that everyone's talking about are okay. So right now, we obviously, as an industry, have borrowed a lot of money to drill oil and gas wells in anticipation that prices would improve over a period of time, and that just hasn't come to fruition. And so now in this situation, we're seeing companies that are that maybe, I mean, there's three issues, right? There's your immediate near-term liquidity, right? Whether or not you have money in the bank just to pay everyday bills, pay your employees. So that's one aspect of the money situation. Then the second aspect is, what loans are coming up that are due and that they require large payments. Can you get extensions? Can you borrow the money from somebody else to pay that loan off? So that's a second aspect. The third aspect is, okay, overall, big picture, how many loans do I have out there? What does my debt situation look like? And so, related to the third aspect, there were some loans that operators took, and they're called RBL loans, and they're reserve. That stands for reserve-based lending. And what banks do is that they basically, over a certain period of time, they loan you money based on what they believe the reserve is worth at certain periods of time. And that process requires something that's called a redetermination. They've redetermined the amount that the reserves are worth, and obviously the determinations are currently going to happen. They're coming up, and now is not a good time to get redetermined at a historically low price, because obviously, you're sitting there with all this money that's owed under a value of $50 a barrel, and 3 or 4 weeks later you're at 20, and so you're going to get a situation where the oil and gas operator owes, in some cases, a substantial amount of money back towards the bank to stay within, the covenant. They call them covenants, but basically your financial restrictions, what you're supposed to stick to, what you told them you were going to stick to as far as how much debt you have versus how much your company's worth. And so that's coming up, and it's a big issue right now.
I think so as well. I was just doing a Google search right now, the force majeure, and a lot of these are talking about how this is an issue that's coming. So I can see where being proactive on this is really going to help navigate the waters, I guess, because, at the end of the day, I mean, are they even booking court cases right now? I mean, the courts are shut down, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I think that's exactly right. So,
I mean, you can sue anybody all day long, but you can't get a court date, can you?
No, I mean, it's kind of, only the most urgent cases are getting hearings right now. To the extent you can get a hearing, they're all virtual. I mean, that's my understanding. And so, obviously I'm not a litigator, but yeah, I mean, the line is getting exponentially longer at this point in time.
But I mean, I imagine like we talked about, the contract law and the due diligence parts are imagine just busy as a beaver, or busy as can be, that sort of thing. So just kind of, I guess, summarizing the force majeure and what the correct pronunciation is for that as well. Just kind of, I guess, give a little summary about that, what people should be considering and thinking about when they start seeing that term come up in the oil and gas headlines, like we've been seeing over the last few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think that honestly, you have it right. It's pronounced force majeure, and I think obviously these operators took oil and gas leases. They've developed them. They've put money into them, and they want to do everything they can to get through the current environment. And obviously, we all think that that's going to happen once the coronavirus issue goes away. There's still people driving. There's still people flying. There's still a lot of petroleum-based transactions going on. So, I think for the big picture, if I'm an operator, I want to be reviewing all my leases, start with the highest value leases first. And to the extent that I don't have really strong language, or I'm concerned about it, reach out to your outside counsel to get an opinion, see what the state-specific issues, things that you should be thinking about are. And obviously, to the extent that there's any concerns that remain, then I think it would be wise to be proactive, start reaching out to landowners, and start trying to work through some of these issues, get extensions, get amendments that basically where both parties agree that they're going to put things on hold in light of the tough situation that we're all in right now.
Chris Cottrell, Winston and Strawn, with an N, correct? Strawn?
That's right.
And just kind of wrapping up here, talking about some of the M&A activity happening today as we're doing this interview. Whiting had their bankruptcy notice, Chapter 11. They're going to do some restructuring. Jim Cramer and a lot of the pundits have come out and said this is just the start. We talked about the 1-2, kind of the shock that happened, the Russia, Saudi Arabia, OPEC shock, and then the coronavirus shock. So you had a supply shock, a demand shock. I'm looking at your LinkedIn page right now, and True Grit, Lessons from the U.S. Energy Industry from the Last Tech Bubble. It looks like your featured story. I don't know if you wrote that or if it looks like you wrote that. So I did want to ask you about, the tech side of things, because really when you look at where the industry seems to be going, the one thing that seems to be pretty clear, though, is there is going to be a new normal of technology when this is all said and done.
Absolutely. I mean, look, I think, I think there's a lot of similarities between what we're going through right now in the tech bubble. And obviously back then you had a lot of pundits saying that companies weren't worth anything. You had big stock fallout, literally trillions of dollars wiped out. But from that event, there was a lot of great technology that was developed, and it laid the foundation for increased connectivity that we all have today with the internet, with the social media stuff that we have, all the videos that we have, the instantaneous connections that we have, were all laid at that time, right? And so you didn't have the numbers of people that adopted that technology that you do today, right? And so I think if I wish I had a magic ball to see the future, but what I expect to happen is that there's a lot of great technology out there. There'll be a lot more emphasis on adopting it, trying to get smarter about how we produce oil and gas. Try to do it, obviously with less cost, less staff, and try to be as efficient as possible. And so obviously I think technology is going to play a big factor. I don't see demand going away within the next 20 to 30 years. The population is going to continue to grow, and you still have a lot of economies around the world that are evolving and growing, and they need access to energy to do that. And the reality is that majority of the population just can't go out and buy a Tesla. And so right now, oil and gas is one of the best sources of reliable energy in the world, and it's just something that I think we're going to need in the near future. So it's not going away, but we certainly do have to get smarter about how we do things.
Appreciate you coming on, talking about some of the force majeure and some of the legal aspects that we're going to be seeing probably in the energy world, at least over the summer, helping us with some M&A activity as well. So talk to people about how you're making money these days and how people can get in touch with you if they want to engage in some business activity with you.
So what we talked earlier about buy low, sell high. So obviously, there's opportunity in every situation, and clearly there's a lot of people that think there's opportunity now. So we're trying to stay in front of our clients, try to help our existing clients get through the uncertainty that they're facing right now. Obviously trying to get in front of new clients that think it's a great time to jump in, which obviously you can't think of a better time than historically low commodity prices to get in, buy assets. So just trying to stay in front of people, and then obviously trying to help people think outside the box, how they can partner up with the right partners to get deals done, think creatively, generate some cash flow, try to keep jobs in place, try to think long term, try to help stabilize the situation, reviewing contracts, reviewing all kinds of things just to try to get some assurance and certainty in this environment. So it's a tough time, but I think obviously we're really well positioned as a firm. We have incredible talent, and I think that we're going to deliver a lot of value. And once the dust settles, I think that a lot of our clients are still going to be around because we're all working together and trying to resolve all these issues. So
Well, I
I'm
tell people
optimistic.
all the time, there's still a lot of money out on the planet. It's just, usually in these types of situations, it does get centralized a little bit. And so you just got to go and figure out how to build a better mousetrap, how to make a better steak sandwich, and figure out what the demand is, because it's not like the money disappears. It just it's just ebbing and flowing and shuffling around and etc. Really, like you mentioned, you got to be creative. You got to figure out a way to get it back out in the marketplace, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, look, at the end of the day, the your character is really determined not by the situations where everything's going great, right, and you're winning. It's the situations where you're losing and you're facing adversity. That's really when you determine someone's true character. And are you going to be a quitter? Are you going to give up, or are you going to do it the American way, right? And are you going to get out there and figure out how to make it work and how to win and how to take it to the next level. And, time and time again, this country has proven that we have the smartest and most talented people in the world. And every day I wake up, I'm just excited to be here, to live here. And I know that we're all going to figure it out together.